Welcome to today's video. I'll be talking about warmer air coming, guys, to a lot of the country this week. So we've been seeing those frigid temperatures, but it's backsiding off. Looks like most of the week this week. Gonna have places in Ohio, Verdes 40s. Places like Texas are gonna be back in the 70s. In the South, we're gonna be warmer too. Again, Florida, we're gonna be warmer also. So let's get started. I know this is already past, but I'm gonna show you how warm Monday was, February 9th, 2026, at 4 p.m. We can see in parts of Kansas we're in the 70s. Missouri in the 70s, Nebraska in the 60s, Iowa in the 60s, Oklahoma in the 70s and 80s. Guys, this is a huge improvement. This is what Monday looked like. Texas in the mid 80s, Louisiana in the 70s, we seen this yesterday. Also, Iowa in the 50s, we seen 60s, Nebraska in the 70s too. Colorado in the 60s and 70s, we seen. New Mexico, we seen 60s and 70s too. With literally, this is like such a huge improvement, but these temperatures will drop today, everybody, in those places. But you can see this is Tuesday, 4 p.m. You can see in Oklahoma, 70s, 50s. We can see Texas, 70s, 80s. Parts of Ohio in the 30s. Kentucky in the 60s. Indiana, we're in the 40s. Illinois, we're in the 50s. Iowa, we're in the 40s. Minnesota, we're in the 20s. Wisconsin, we're in the 20s. Kansas, we're in the 50s. Nebraska, we're in the 40s. North and South Dakota, we're in the 30s and 40s. You can see Colorado, we're in the 40s. Arizona, we're in the 70s too. We can see at this time also on here. Cool. So let's move on to the next thing, everyone. So this is what Tuesday night could look like in parts of Arkansas, 60s, Texas in the 60s, Tennessee in the 60s, Kentucky in the 50s and 60s, Indiana in the 30s, Michigan in the 20s, Minnesota in the teens, Wisconsin in the 20s, Nebraska in the 40s, South Dakota and the Verdes we've seen. But this is a huge improvement, guys. Like since like the frigid air, like, these are warm. Like some of these, this ain't really warm temperatures, but I'm saying it's warmer than like the temperatures we've been having across the country. Is like 0 degrees, negative temperatures, negative wind chills. This is a huge improvement, everybody. Like extremely. Louisiana, we're in the 70s. We're having some shots almost at night. So this is Wednesday at 3 a.m. Everyone we can see. Got parts of Louisiana in the 60s too, we can see. Ohio in the 20s, Indiana in the 20s, Illinois in the 30s, Kansas in the 30s, Missouri in the 30s, Colorado in the 30s, uh, Montana in the 30s. We can see Wyoming in the 30s, Utah in the 40s, Arizona in the 40s, New Mexico in the 40s, Georgia in the 50s, Florida in the 50s too. We can see Kentucky in the 30s, Indiana in the 20s, Michigan in the 20s too, Wisconsin in the teens. We can see also South Dakota in the 30s. We can see Iowa in the 20s. We can see Missouri in the 30s. We can see also on here. This is a lot warmer temperatures. Everybody we see. Then we got Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. We can see colder air moving, but it's not still as bad as the last couple weeks. Louisiana in the 60s, Texas in the 60s, Kansas in the 30s, Missouri in the 30s, Illinois in the 20s, Indiana in the 20s, Michigan in the 20s, Kansas in the 30s, New Mexico in the 40s, Utah in the 30s, uh, New Mexico in the 40s, Wyoming in the 30s, Montana in the 30s too. We can see Florida in the 50s and 60s. We can see Louisiana in the 60s, Tennessee in the 40s, Kentucky in the 30s, Illinois in the 20s too. We can see in Minnesota in the single digits too. You can see on here. Okay, so this is what Wednesday at 2 p.m. could look like in parts of Louisiana. We got the 70s. Parts of Georgia, we got into 70s. Texas, we got the 70s. Kansas, we got the 60s too. No, not Oklahoma. We got the 60s too. Kansas, we got the 50s. Missouri, we got the 50s. Arkansas, we got the 60s. Tennessee, we got the 50s. Kentucky, 40s. Ohio in the 30s, we can see. Iowa in the 40s too, we can see. Florida, we're back in the 70s. Georgia, we're back in the 60s and 70s. Then we got Wednesday night, everyone, at 8 p.m. 60s in Texas, 40s in Kansas, Missouri in the 40s, Illinois in the 40s, Indiana in the 30s, Ohio in the 20s, North Dakota in the 30s, South Dakota in the 40s, Nebraska in the 40s, and Kansas in the 40s. Missouri in the 40s, Iowa in the 40s, Tennessee in the 40s, Kentucky in the 30s, Georgia in the 40s and 50s. You can see Mississippi in the 60s, Alabama in the 50s. We can see Louisiana in the 60s too. You can see uh, Colorado in the 40s, Montana in the 30s. We can see Wyoming in the 40s too, Idaho in the 30s. We can see also too on here. Minnesota in the 20s, Wisconsin in the teens. We can see also Iowa in the 40s too. We can see in Wisconsin in the teens too in some parts. All right, fast forward to Thursday at 3 a.m. We can see in parts of Ohio, you got in the teens. You can see also Kentucky in the 30s, Texas in the 60s, Nebraska in the 30s. We can see also Kansas in the 40s also too. You can see Oklahoma in the 40s, Arkansas in the 40s, Missouri in the 30s, Kansas in the 40s, Colorado in the 40s, Wyoming in the 30s. We can see Montana in the 30s also, Arizona in the 40s too. We can see on here. Then parts of Texas is in the 60s, and Louisiana too. We can see in Florida is in the 50s and 60s too. All right, fast forward to Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Got Texas in the 60s, Louisiana in the 60s, Iowa in the 30s, Minnesota in the teens, Michigan in the teens and 20s, Ohio in the 20s, Nebraska in the 40s and 30s, Kansas in the 40s, Missouri in the 40s too, Arkansas in the 40s also we can see, and Kansas in the 40s and 50s. All right, then we see our warmer air. This is what Thursday afternoon could look like potentially. Kansas we're in the 50s and 60s, and closer to 70 in some spots too. Oklahoma we're in the 70s and 80s. Arkansas we're in the 60s and 70s. Kentucky we're in the 40s and 50s. Georgia we're in the 60s. Florida we're in the 70s. Ohio we're in the 30s. Michigan we're in the 20s. Minnesota we're in the 30s. Nebraska we're in the 50s and 60s. We can see in New Mexico we're in the 70s and 60s too. We can see parts of Texas we're in the mid to lower 80s to mid 80s and mid 70s too. We can see on here. Then we can see in some parts of Indiana we're in the 30s too also. All right, everybody. So let's move on to Thursday at 10 p.m. Got 70s in Texas, Oklahoma in the 60s and 70s, Missouri in the 50s, Missouri in the 40s, Iowa in the 30s, Minnesota in the 30s too, Wisconsin in the teens, Michigan in the teens, Nebraska in the 40s, South Dakota in the 40s too, North Dakota in the 30s, Montana in the 40s we can see also on here. Then in New Mexico we can see in the 60s too. Then we can see in parts of Georgia we're in the 40s too. Then we can see parts of Kentucky in the 30s, Tennessee in the 40s, Indiana in the 30s too, Missouri in the 40s too. We can see on here. Then we can see parts of Montana in the 30s also. So let's move on to Friday, early Friday morning. Friday morning at 4 a.m. We have 60s in Texas, near 70 in some parts. Oklahoma in the 50s and 60s. Arkansas in the 40s and 50s. Georgia in the 40s. Ohio in the 20s. Michigan in the teens. Wisconsin in the 20s. Minnesota in the 20s. North Dakota in the 20s. South Dakota in the 30s. Wyoming in the 30s too. Utah in the 30s. Arizona in the 40s. You can see also. Then we can see Tennessee in the 40s also. Arkansas in the 40s. Missouri in the 40s. Iowa in the 30s. You can see Minnesota in the 20s too. North and South Dakota in the 30s. Nebraska in the 30s. And Kansas in the 40s too. And Oklahoma in the 40s and 50s too. We can see on here. All right, so let's get to Friday afternoon, everybody, at 5 p.m. So this is what Friday afternoon could look like, everybody. So we can have 80s in Texas, everybody. In mid 80s in parts of Texas, Louisiana, we can have 70s and 80s. Parts of Arkansas, we can have 70s and 50s too. This probably will change a little bit. Illinois, we're in the 40s. Iowa, we're in the 50s. Kansas, we're in the 50s too. Then North Dakota, we're in the 50s. And South Dakota, we're in the 50s too. You can see in Minnesota, we're in the 30s and 40s and 50s too. So this will be almost it for this video. We're going to look at a couple mornings in this video. Utah, we could be in the 40s too. Montana, we could be in the 30s and 40s too. We can see on here. Florida, we could be in the 70s too. Georgia, we could be in the 60s too, in 40s, in 50s. In Tennessee, Kentucky in the 40s too. We can see also. Then we can see in Colorado, we're in the 50s too. We can see also on here. So I hope you enjoyed this video, everyone. Thank you for watching. See you guys in the next one. Make sure to subscribe, notification bell. You never miss a video like this, guys. Okay, guys. See you guys in the next one.